And can you believe it? Here we are, season 14 of Gridiron Nation on TSN, our 7th season on the Big Red Network. I'm Jim Mullin. He's Gord Randall. Gord, what did you do during the off season?
Not much. Just hit 465 in my men's league baseball. Other than that, just resting up for football season. It is in full swing already for me, both at the high school and, of course, with the college ranks.
Well, part of the football avalanche that we bring you is signatured by the classic Stateside Five. In at 5, Nate Marty from A-State, 10 tackles, 2 quarterback hurries, and a pass breakup from his linebacker position. At 4, the kid from Vancouver who's playing for Boise State, the super true sophomore safety, Ty Benefield. 11 solos and 15 tackles overall, plus a fumble recovery after a 3-point loss at Oregon and an offensive explosion against Georgia Southern. It's the 3rd NCAA stop, and it may be a charm for Christian Vaillere, the Ottawa junior, 45 of 72 for 448 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no INTs, with a 1-1 opening start for Georgia State. Yes, it is Nathan's not-so-little brother in at number 2, Curtis Rourke of Indiana, 31 of 40 for 448 yards, 3 TDs, and a clean sheet. And in at number 1, you have to put this guy here. He is the defending Cornish winner, the pride of Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada, Alec O'Manor, from Stanford, the sophomore with 10 receptions for 147 yards. You got to think the best is yet to come. Well, Gord, there's our first look at the Stateside Five this year. Can you handicap the Canadian class in the NCAA? Because one of the reasons why I ask this is that we've always had a focus on a group that had that next step NFL opportunity. I think it's a bit of a different group this year, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say so. I do think that our returning Cornish winner, Alec O'Manor, is a legitimate NFL prospect. And in fact, I did see some mocks preseason that even had him sneaking into the tail end of the first round. So that is very much a bona fide NFL prospect. But beyond that, there's some kind of question marks around the board. You know, Akeem Mesidor, I think, is an NFL level talent. This fall will determine a lot for him, though, because last year was pretty much wiped out because of injury. Some of the other guys around, we're not seeing guys that really pop off offensively in particular right now. I think there's a couple young studs on the defensive side. Ty Benefield comes to mind, who's not yet draft eligible. So I think that when we talk about our names this year, you're probably, if you're a CFL fan, are probably going to be a little bit more invested maybe even than usual, because I think that there's a realistic shot of seeing a lot of these guys be CFL contributors pretty quickly, because I just don't know that they're going to get the interest from the NFL that they might need.
Before we get into 2 Canadian quarterbacks who have the opportunity to post some decent numbers, you brought up the name Ty Benefield. David Benefield likes to bring up the name Ty Benefield with me in numerous phone calls over the offseason as well. But, you know, he's a proud papa, and he rightly deserves to be. Ty Benefield really jumped off the sheet at Boise State in his first year, in his freshman year, and it looks like he is going to continue that momentum into his sophomore season.
Absolutely. Through 2 games, he's already got 14 tackles, had a fumble recovery at Oregon last weekend as the Broncos almost took out the Oregon Ducks, who were a lot of people's pick for national champion going into the season. So really good effort from the Broncos. Unfortunately, their special teams let them down. They gave 2 return touchdowns to lose that game. But Benefield has been not only a bona fide starter, but I would say a clear standout in the Broncos secondary early on. And the level at which they're playing early on here tells me that they're going to be a pretty relevant team throughout the season over there in the Mountain West Conference.
Now, Christian Vaillere is one of the quarterbacks that we want to talk about. He's bounced around. He was at Pitt. Now he's down at Georgia State after starting his journey at Penn State. And then Curtis Rourke. You thought the Rourke name would last at Ohio for the entire time those 2 brothers were there. But in his senior year, the 6'5" Rourke has decided to take his game to Indiana. Can you handicap both of these guys?
Well, I'll start with Rourke since you finished with him. And I think the jump to Indiana is a smart move for him. But I would caution people to be expecting, who are expecting large pop off the page numbers from him, to maybe temper those expectations a little bit. And that's just simply because of the style of football that gets played in the Big Ten. I do think, and I'm stepping on our toes of next weekend's, what we're looking ahead to, but I do think that this upcoming game this weekend at UCLA will be a really good litmus test for what we can expect from Rourke this season, because it is a Big Ten game, but it's not necessarily like UCLA is a West Coast team. They don't necessarily play Big Ten style football, at least as of yet. I think they're maybe evolving that way, but this is not going into Iowa and facing a sledgehammer of a defense, which you will see in that conference a lot of weeks. And that's where I wonder if Curtis's counting stats are going to be maybe a little bit capped this year. And that may limit his NFL opportunity, though I do think that being at Indiana is a good move for him on the whole. And then when you look at Vailleux, he goes in the other direction, steps down to a smaller platform of a program, but a program that was willing to give him the keys to the car and let him go. And the early returns have been pretty good, though the level of competition has not necessarily been great. 24-21 victory over FCS Chattanooga this past weekend. His stat line looks pretty decent on the whole, but the overall performance, if you want to be a serious contender in the Sun Belt like Georgia State is, then you want to be putting those teams away pretty comfortably and not eking out a field goal victory with 24 points on offense. So I do think that there's some work to be done on both ends there, and I do wonder what the NFL opportunities will be for both of those guys, though Rourke in particular I think is going to be a very hot commodity in this upcoming spring CFL draft.
I'm not sure if everybody loves the transfer window. It certainly makes for a busy offseason for us to track who's going where. In terms of a particular position group, Canadian receivers, they've moved all over the place this offseason. Who stands out for you out of that group?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Damian Alford. We have a bunch last year in the preseason. I identified him as a guy to maybe keep an eye on as a potential Cornish contender this year. And through 2 games in his new home at Utah, has yet to catch a pass. So that's been a little bit disappointing. Malik Mega has moved from Penn State over to Coastal Carolina. He's getting his feet wet, and the early returns there have been a little bit promising. A couple catches a game and making at least a little bit of an impact. But when we talk about the receivers, it's the FCS level guys that I think might be most interesting aside from Ayamana this season. And there's a trio of guys in particular, names that you can probably remember if you watched our show last year. Nolan Allman, Eastern Washington, Keelan White over at Montana, Joey Corcoran out at New Hampshire. These are guys who have the ability they're one of the key offensive weapons on their team and have the ability to put up some eye-popping numbers on any given week. So those are guys I'll be keeping a close eye on. And because they're down at that FCS level, that doesn't close the door to the NFL for them, but it certainly makes that opening in the door frame a lot smaller for them and makes it much more likely that you'll see those guys be CFL contributors sooner rather than later.
One thing that makes the door opening just a little less for players is starting the years off with injury. And we've had a number of Canadian players in the NCAA not appear in games. There are injury problems, and that is a slow start for the group generally, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Logan Taylor at Boston College missed their first game, a big upset win over Florida State in Tallahassee. He did manage to get back into the lineup this past weekend. Newer Gatkuth over at Colorado State was a guy that we talked about a fair bit last year. Same with him. So health is going to dictate a lot for some of these guys, and it's been not necessarily the easiest start for those two in particular on that front. So hopefully some of these guys are able to get healed up and get back into the thick of things, because those were 2 names that I was wanting to watch pretty closely this season. And so I'm hopeful that we'll get the chance to sooner rather than later.
Well, that's our focus on the NCAA. When we come back, we'll check out U Sports. Stick around. And welcome back to Gridiron Nation on TSN, everyone. Time for a little bit of U Sports talk when it comes to university football. And the authority on university football north of the border these days is Dashawn Stephens from PRSVRE. Dashawn, thanks for joining us.
Jim, Gord, thanks for having me. Great to be here with you both today.
Let's talk football first. We'll talk some issues a little bit later on surrounding the game in Canada. A great rivalry game. Usually we call it the rock fight between Laval and Montreal, but it was wide open in front of a giant crowd for the regular season. Take us through Montreal versus Laval, Dashawn.
Yeah, I think Montreal versus Laval is the arms race in the RSCQ. That has been the arms race that we've all seen for the last 20 years. But the interesting thing about this rivalry is that what people forget is that Montreal swept Laval in 2023. They beat them 2 times in the regular season, then they beat them in the Dunsmore Cup. It was the first time that Montreal actually swept Laval in program history. So the Rouge et Or were hungry to get a win over the Carabin this past Saturday, and they were able to do that. They were able to come out with a 23-22 win off of a 54-yard game-winning field goal with 23 seconds left. Big thing about this game, I think, for Laval, it was just a confidence booster. And it's really hard for me to say that, but the Laval Rouge et Or actually did need a confidence booster up against their conference rival, and they were able to get that. Big win for them, 1-0 in the season series. They're going to meet again in October, and of course, it's always going to come down to the Dunsmore Cup. But the big thing for Montreal, though, is they were missing the Defensive Player of the Year, Harold Miassen, on defense. So for the Carabin, even though they lost in Quebec City, they can, take that 1-point loss knowing that they lost without the best player defensively in the country.
Gord, nice to see some wide open play between these two. It seems that when they play early in the season and the sun is out and the temperatures are warm, there's a little more offense. I think when they get back together again, especially in the playoffs, we'll see another one of those 11-9 rock fights.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that playoff football is different for a number of reasons. The weather notwithstanding, excuse me. So, I agree, and we saw this last year too. We saw the scoreline start to creep up. You for years have jokingly or maybe half jokingly referred to this rivalry as the rock fight. And the thing is that last year, driven by guys like Jonathan Senecal pushing that Montreal offense forward, for example, it started to look less like a rock fight. In 2 of the 3 matchups at least. So I'm hopeful that this is a trend that will continue, because for years with these two teams, you had to respect them, but you didn't necessarily enjoy watching them, especially when they played each other. And so if that continues to be a trending in the right direction, I think that's really good news for the RSCQ conference, these schools and youth sports on the whole. And the other story about this game that I think bears mentioning is a record crowd at PEPS for this. Over 20,000 plus de 20,000 people watching this game. That's a huge number for them. The tailgate looked like an Oktoberfest or something like that. It was a great looking time. All in all, just a really good day out through and through in Quebec City.
Okay, let's go around the country a little bit. Gord, I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off really quickly for you because of your 0-6 picks when you're moonlighting somewhere else and making picks on the Canada West. Make sense of the Canada West for us.
Okay, so I thought that we were supposed to be picking losers, okay? Anyway, the Canada West is kind of topsy-turvy right now. And there's been a lot of changeover. But I'll take UBC, for example, out in my neck of the woods. That's the reigning conference champion. And they did lose both their offensive tackles to the NFL, but what's been particularly surprising is that it's their defense getting gashed through the first couple of games. They've lost 2 in a row at home to start the season, and now they're in a big hole. And they have to go on the road this week. I believe it's in Regina they're going to and try and find their way to their first victory. And speaking of Regina, they knocked off their conference rivals Saskatchewan for the first time in a couple of years this past weekend. Manitoba, Brian Dobie has announced that he's retiring at the end of the season. He's been at the helm there for over 30 years, I think it is now. He's been around forever. He's an alumnus. He's an absolute legend at that school. And that appears to be buoying what was already a pretty good team into a very hot start. And so I'll be honest with you guys, I think that probably the potential to be the biggest story in youth sports this fall is the Brian Dobie farewell tour with the way the Bisons are playing right now. And if they make a run, there's a possibility, a real chance of this being potentially a fairy tale ending for Brian Dobie. And so that, for me, is the most interesting team in the conference right now. And then you get up to Alberta. Alberta starts on the road in Vancouver, has a great win in the Hardy Cup rematch from last year over UBC. And then they go back home and they get beat by Calgary. And so it really feels like you don't know what to expect already just 2 weeks into the schedule.
Dashawn, in the OUA, please tell me it's not Western and everybody else.
Okay, all right, Gord, Jim, I won't tell you it's Western and everybody else, but I will tell you this. the storyline in the OUA this season, and I think it's the storyline every season, is who's ready to step up to the Western Mustangs. And this year, the candidates are the Laurier Golden Hawks and the Windsor Lancers, both of whom are 2-0, both of whom are nationally ranked, and both of whom boast very stubborn defenses as well as multifaceted offenses. Now, the Windsor Lancers, obviously, going to have to wait a little bit to face the Laurier Golden Hawks or the Western Mustangs until Week 8, but the Laurier Golden Hawks will get their first shot at the Western Mustangs this upcoming Saturday at a University Stadium, which will be a Yates Cup rematch. And as we all remember, in the Yates Cup last season, Laurier led at halftime before falling apart against the Western Mustangs in the second half. So I think this year in the OUA, I won't say it's Western and the rest. I will say it will come down, though, to the Western Mustangs, the Laurier Golden Hawks, and the Windsor Lancers. And you know what? You might even want to throw maybe like a middle pack team in there, like the Queens Gales, who've been looking pretty good to start out the season as well. But obviously for the Western Mustangs, I will also say it comes down to health. One of the big things that we saw last year was that that team fell apart. Keon Edwards broke his leg late in the season. Keanu Yazbek tore his ACL. Evan Hillock injured his shoulder. And by the time that they got to the national semifinal against the Montreal Caravan, they had completely fallen apart. So this is going to be our first year actually in a while seeing a healthy Western Mustangs team against the rest of the OUA. We'll see what they can do, but I will say the gap in the OUA has kind of become a little bit closer over the last number of years, with Laurier rebuilding and becoming a national powerhouse once again, and the Windsor Lancers coming out of nowhere behind JP Cercelli and what he's been able to do with that program. The OUA has become a lot more competitive. I think it's going to be a 3-team horse race this year instead of a 1-team horse race.
Now, we're talking with a great deal of enthusiasm about youth sports football. Sometimes I wonder if we might be the only 3 people talking about youth sports football in a public place these days. Gord, this is a familiar lament year to year, but it really feels to me that youth sports as an organization and the 4 conferences as organizations really need to double down and up the effort to create some visibility for football in their space again.
Yep. I mean, it's basically as simple as that, right? The thing that youth sports has appeared to lack for years now is any sort of centralized leadership structure, whether it is centralized leadership from the conferences for their own conferences, whether it's centralized leadership from the national organization over the conferences and the members. Just to give you kind of an example of this, again, present company excluded, I can't think of a single account, a single post that I've seen on social media since the season started that hasn't come from a school's own account directly or one of their coaches. So there are not media people who are talking about this. The conferences themselves are not pushing stuff out there. There are no features. There's no personalities being promoted. It is entirely up to, it's so decentralized, it's entirely up to schools and entirely up to athletes to promote themselves and to try and get themselves into your consciousness. And the problem is that that's a lot more difficult for, say, one athlete to do, right? I coach at the high school ranks, so I keep track of guys that I coached against or coached even still. And so those guys, I see what they're doing for themselves, but that's because I'm in their circle a little bit. The rest of the general public is just never going to be reached by something like that without any kind of centralized structure pushing it forward. It's much easier for a casual to watch the U Sports feed and be flooded with highlights every Saturday like it should be, except that it's not. And so, that alone is a great example of where the organization just continues to fail itself.
Dashawn, we had a discussion just off air. In about a minute or so, where do you find hope for the promotion of youth sports and youth sports athletes?
Jim and Gord, I'm really optimistic for Canadian college sports as a whole when it comes to the athletes that are participating in the product and when it comes to outside entities that are taking interest in the product. So you're seeing it right now across youth sports, across Canadian college programs. You're having a lot of athletes decide to stay home who could go down south and get Division I scholarships. They're deciding to stay home, go to universities in Canada, go to colleges in Canada, understanding that they will get a quality education here that can take them into their life beyond being an athlete. You're seeing athletes leave Division I schools and come home to Canada. You're seeing this not only in football, you're seeing this in other sports such as basketball, hockey, etc., the whole 9 yards. So I'm very optimistic about the personalities and the brands that you're seeing come to Canada and stay in Canada. And I'm also really optimistic about the media entities that you're seeing take interest in the product. Now, I might say, of course, PRSVRE Media Group, we're doing a great job of covering university sports here in Canada. But you're seeing a number of also different media entities as well. They're doing a good job. So I'm really optimistic about the actual landscape itself in terms of the athletes that are staying here. I'm really optimistic in terms of the media entities that are beginning to invest in university sports here in Canada. And my hope is that with all that continued investment, right, it helps lead youth sports as an organization down a direction which allows them to understand, hey, how can we continue to capitalize on these athletes that are coming here? How can we continue to capitalize on all the media that's paying attention to us? And how can we create a better infrastructure as a whole for the university sports fan, the casual university sports fan? Because that's what matters for the most at the end of the day.
Dashawn Stephens, PRSVRE Media, thanks very much for doing this, and we'll do this again real soon.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to coming back again.
And when we return, Kevin McDonald, the new Executive Director of Football Canada, joins us. Stick around. Welcome back to Gridiron Nation, everyone. For those of you who don't know, I've been involved on the Football Canada Board of Directors, or as president, for about the last 8 years, and I've never been so confident in its future without this guest. Our guest coming on right now, which is Kevin McDonald, the new Executive Director of Football Canada. Kevin, welcome to Gridiron Nation.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for the kind words.
Well, you've done a great job so far this summer, throwing in, I'd say, at the start of April. You hit the ground running in this position. Tell us about your summer and tell us about what you've learned about the domestic and international football communities.
Well, yeah, as you said, I started officially full-time in June, came on a little bit earlier in April, but the staff that was there in place before I had started had done a lot of the heavy lifting to get ourselves ready for the summer. And the existing team in the office was really what won me over when I decided I wanted to go full speed ahead with pursuing this opportunity. So, yeah, our domestic event calendar was quite full. As you mentioned, we've had events across the country. I've got to back into that travel swing a little bit and traveling to all of our big cities and getting to meet some of the membership and some of the leadership across the provinces. You know, we started in spring with Flag in Kingston, which was basically an all-star tournament of Flag reps from across the country. And having not been around Flag in quite some time, I was blown away at the skill and the athleticism of these young athletes, both the male and the female side. It was tremendous to watch the level of execution and the preparation that had gone into getting ready for a national championship like that. It blew me away. And then conversely, having a chance to be in Fredericton for our U18 Women's Tackle Championship was something that was really special for me because I hadn't been around women's tackle before. And I was, again, blown away by the level of commitment and preparation from these young athletes coming in from across the country to compete in a 6-on-6 format tournament. I was just really excited about what I saw, and the potential for the women's game, both on tackle and flag, is tremendous. And I'm really excited. The Football Canada Cup was nice to see from this side because it gave me an opportunity to see everyone come together and celebrate a national championship on the tackle side for the boys. And it also gave me a great opportunity to network and reconnect with a lot of people that I've spent time with over the years in my prior life at the CFL, but and then some new faces in leadership roles across the country. So it was great to really dive in and have some good conversations about where we're going. One common theme that emanated from everyone and has come up in my conversations consistently is just the need to unify the country and get people back on the same page and get us pushing forward and embracing the opportunities that are ahead of us and working collectively and strategically and with some intention about the things we get involved in and the choices we make and how we perceive ourselves. We're quickly realized, we provide tremendous value to our members, and we should be really proud of what we do and what we offer to young men and women across this country.
When you talk about intention, the thing that I feel right now about this organization is it's moving from a fairly sound, low-key amateur organization as we go into this Olympic quadrennial to really professionalizing the operations. Talking with you, talking with Peter Baxter, the new chairperson for Football Canada, that would appear to be the direction. What is involved in all of this?
Well, I think it's really for me to take a step back and just in its simplest term, identify and again be intentional about how we describe ourselves. We are a sport delivery vehicle, but we are also a business, and I think we need to talk about ourselves as a business in terms of what we provide, the customers we align ourselves with, what we can offer. The partnership landscape is relatively untouched. I think that's going to be a great opportunity for us as we now have flag football into the Olympic cycle. But it's really just drilling down and understanding who our customers are, what our framework looks like, and really understanding a little bit better what the back end of our business looks like from a digital footprint standpoint, what we can offer a partnership in terms of what a program looks like, what our reach is, and what our people want, and what do they want to be involved with. And I know, first and foremost, officiating development was something that was always at the top of my and the CFL's priority when I was working in football operations there. It's still the same. We've got tremendous growth and an explosion of growth really on the flag side. But we also need to accompany that with, officiating development, getting young people engaged and out into the fields where they can keep the sport moving. They're a tremendous asset and a partner of ours that we need to do a better job working alongside. And then the coaching development piece is something that we are, I think have fallen behind on. And it's something the membership needs. And it's something we're going to have to really, invest in and put some energy into reframing what that coaching model looks like to get people certified so they can get out and provide a safe, fun, exciting environment for our athletes.
2 decades plus at the Canadian Football League. I think you were the vice president of football operations for a dozen years there. May stand to be corrected on that. What are the major differences that you see so far in the cultures between professional football and amateur football in this country? And what do they share in common outside of the game itself?
Yeah, I think for me, and having had an opportunity to be out on the fields, I kind of got goosebumps, and I get goosebumps now because it for a first time in a long time reminded me of what sport is really all about. And at its simplest terms, the joy and the commitment that these young athletes get from being part of a team, the accountability, the all things that do ring true at the pro level, but just really that it's simplest form at the grassroots level, the joy that sport can bring, what it can do to a young athlete in terms of developing confidence and future life skills. Football is really a snapshot of what life really looks like in terms of all the things that are required to be a good teammate, a good player. And I think at the pro level, you're dealing with adult professional athletes, some of those lessons often get lost, and that's just the reality of a pro business, and it's a job for a lot of those people. But to really get back to what sport is about and what our primary responsibility is, and I believe strongly that we play a strong role in influencing and shaping the leaders of tomorrow through the sport that we deliver. And we've got that responsibility to impart on our coaches and how they present the game and the lessons that they teach. And that goes back to that coaching development piece. We've got a lot of work to do there. So, again, it was in its simplest form. It was really nice just to get back out onto the fields where it's really celebrated for what it is. And it's the joy of the game.
We've talked a lot about the domestic programs and the domestic events, but you had 2 IFAF events that you went to this year. I think you were about 14 days into the job when you went into permanently, that is, when you went to the World Junior Championship, where Canada captured their 3rd straight gold medal for the U20s, and then over to Finland for the World Flag Championships. Tell me about that international scope that's never really been either present or up front for the sport in this country.
Yeah, there is something that comes with representing your national flag, right? And being part of a national team. I was a very small part of those. The World Junior Tackle in Edmonton, the U20s was well underway. The organizing committee in Alberta, Tim Enger and his group did a phenomenal job executing and hosting an international event. We had some challenges that came with, a team dropping out of the tournament. So Canada put in two rosters, but it was really an amazing opportunity to give an extra 50 athletes an experience at international competition. So, to see how far the world has come, I think on the tackle side, how they prepared, how they modeled their team, the execution, the way the coaches, worked with their athletes, preparing and getting ready. It was exciting to see, because I hadn't had an opportunity to be around the international game, and I was really excited about what I saw. Japan and Austria were phenomenally well prepared. And Canada again was victorious, and it highlighted how great our domestic product is here, and that we've got a lot of really good things going. We just need to keep pushing the ball forward on some of those things. And then the international flag piece for the adult men and women, just getting back from Finland recently, was a real eye-opener for me. I touched on the athleticism at that Kingston All-Star flag with the young kids, but I was really blown away at the skill level. For anyone that thinks flag football is just something you play at recess, I encourage you to if you're a football fan, to go and find some of those archive broadcasts from the World Championship, because it was amazing, the talent that was on display there. Our men and women were amazing. They represented Canada super proudly, and did an amazing job. So we've got, with that my first IFAF event, that is the last opportunity. A club, team will go on to represent our national program. Moving forward, we've got to shift the page into the next 4-year cycle and getting ready for LA in 2028, and making sure that we're in a position that Canada qualifies for that Olympic Games, because with the amazing athletes that we have in our country, there's no way we should be coming home from that tournament without a medal around our necks. And we've got to put a framework in place that allows us to go across the country and identify the best athletes, and create a framework that allows them to prepare and get ready for international competition.
Finally, Kevin, let's take a strategic plan. Let's sketch it out on a napkin here while we're in this interview. Where are we going to land this in about 5 years? If you're piloting Football Canada through the Olympic Games, we're a year after the Olympic Games. What story are you going to tell about where Football Canada is, who it is, and where it's at?
Well, I think, like you said, we're going to be celebrating with a gold medal around our necks, and we're going to use that as a lightning rod. I mean, I think the Olympic movement already has given us a lot of positive energy around the flag piece. I think the flag growth is going to also ignite tackles, but to tackles benefit, I think there's some areas of the tackle game that we're going to be able to shore up. I mentioned the officiating development, the coaching development. We've got a lot of work with our partners to improve that space. But we're going to be a self-sufficient machine. We've yet to scratch the surface on our corporate landscape, and I believe that corporate Canada wants to be part of the stories we have to tell in shaping young men and women across this country. But I want our sport to be something that is viewed as safe, that is welcoming. We've got a lot of new Canadians. I think flag is a great entry point. To get some people familiar with tossing around an oblong-shaped piece of pigskin. And it's a great introductory mechanism. And when I say that tackle is going to benefit, I think a lot of those people that get involved in flag are going to be curious and then become interested and fall in love with tackle as well. So I think there's a lot of work to do. I think there's, my relationships with the provinces is going to continue to improve. We've got some work there to rebuild some bridges and get people believing in the direction we need to go forward in. A strat plan, as you mentioned, is a big part of my mandate. So the next year is going to be really understanding what the priorities look like across the country, finding out the things that our office is responsible for. I mentioned earlier, we've got a tremendous staff. We've got to bolster up in a couple key areas and move some people around as we get ready for LA. But we've got a great team in place, and I'm really excited about the prospects that lie ahead for our business.
Well, all of the football community across Canada should be very excited that you're at the helm to lead Football Canada towards the Olympic Games and build on our successes at the tackle level, both for men and women. Kevin McDonald, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
When we come back, Games of the Week. Final segment of the first episode of Gridiron Nation on TSN. Gord, picks of the week time. What do you got for us south of the line?
So 2 games I'm keeping my eye on south of the line this weekend, and because of conference realignment, there's actually a whole bunch of rivalry games going on. You got Oregon State this weekend, Colorado State this weekend, Washington State this weekend. So we're going to have to this is part of the new normal we're going to have to get used to in the NCAA, is some of these traditional rivalry games being played early in the season since the teams have split conferences. Anyway, into my games. The first game I'm keeping an eye on is Friday, and that is UNLV traveling to Lawrence to face the Kansas Jayhawks. Now, one of the reasons I find this kind of intriguing is that this is a rematch of their bowl matchup from last season, funnily enough. But UNLV continues to be a very intriguing group of 5 team. They're off to a 2-0 start. Their offense has looked incredibly explosive. Ricky White III might be the best receiver in the country that not a lot of people are talking about right now. Survived a quarterback change and has not missed a beat. 3 touchdowns receiving this past weekend for him. He is a star. And of course, for our Canadian contingency, we've got Jet Elab, who's in the secondary for UNLV, number 9 for them, who is a consistent contributor as well. And they face a Kansas Jayhawks squad that suffered a setback, got upset this past weekend, and we've yet to see the poll as of the time of filming here, but has probably topped out of the top 25 because of it. Lance Leipold, that's new territory for him. It's been largely smooth sailing for him since he's got to Kansas, a place that's traditionally been very difficult to win. He's done a great job. They'll be wanting to get back on the horse real quick, so this should be a good one. And then Saturday afternoon, we're going to see the first ever Big Ten football game at the Rose Bowl in Los Angeles. And it just so happens to be, as I alluded to earlier in the show, our boy Curtis Rourke and his Indiana Hoosiers traveling into Pasadena specifically, to face the UCLA Bruins. And there's a lot of intrigue here because Indiana, whole new coaching staff, new quarterback is in Curtis Rourke, a team that has historically been kind of a doormat in the Big Ten over the last number of years. And they're trying to take things to the next level. And then there's UCLA, also a brand new coaching staff. Deshaun Foster coming back to his alma mater. They have a quarterback in place, Nathan Garbers, but they're trying to transition into the Big Ten successfully. And their first game in Hawaii was not necessarily a resounding success. So it'll be really interesting to see. And it should be a pretty competitive game, I think. UCLA, as of right now, just a 2.5-point favorite. So a lot of interesting stuff to watch on that one, in my opinion.
Thanks very much for that, Gord. For everyone here on Gridiron Nation on TSN, this is Jim Mullin saying, let's get out to the game.